So that being said, the big news over here in England this week is that finally there is some light at the end of the tunnel for fans in terms of going to games again. I will break down what the UK government has said, and then I'll ask you guys what you think about it. But the second national lockdown here in England will end on December the 2nd. And from then, there is a plan to get a maximum of 4,000 fans back in stadiums at elite sporting events. So that means Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, and all the way down to the 5th and 6th tiers, because there have been no fans at Premier League stadiums since March. Now, the complicated thing about this is England as a whole will be split into different tier systems based on the cases of COVID-19 in that particular region. So, for example, if the southeast of England is in tier 1, 4,000 fans are allowed, a maximum of 4,000 fans are allowed. If Birmingham is in tier 2, then only 2,000 fans are allowed at the game. And if a city like Liverpool or Newcastle is in tier 3, then no fans are allowed. It will be monitored. Certain regions of England will move from one tier to another, depending on if the cases are going up and down. So it could change quite quickly, guys. But my initial thoughts on this is that obviously there's a lot of more important things going on in the world of the pandemic, and a lot of things that governments should be focused on. But the UK government and England and the situation in particular, they've obviously looked at the situation and thought, we can do this safely. There's been a lot of test events. There's been a lot of research into seeing what's happened across Europe and Germany and other countries, and in France where they have had fans so far. And as long as it can be done safely, we're talking about 4,000 fans in 30 to 50 to 60,000 capacity stadiums. As long as that can be done safely, I think it'll be a huge boost for Premier League players, managers, everyone connected with the teams, and people watching around the world as well, to see that it can be done and there can be some kind of atmosphere created safely. So before we go on to breaking down the individual clubs and the response, Nick Mendola, I want to get your thoughts on this for the Premier League.
So my thoughts are generally that what I'm worried about is the responsibility that we're putting on fans. And the reason I say that is I'm not even trying to be hypercritical. I'm just saying, let's say you're at Spurs Man City last week and Tottenham scores a big goal. I remember my first Premier League game, sat in the away section for Newcastle Stoke at the Britannia. It's a relegation campaign for Newcastle. Andy Carroll, Newcastle boy, Alan Shearer, Newcastle interim manager. They score to tie it. A guy comes sprinting down the back of the bleachers behind me to high-five a friend and almost knocks me 2 rows forward, which I loved. Can you contain yourself? You're asking a lot of people who don't necessarily care. Let's remember that about the science behind it. So I worry about that. And I also think when teams are social distance, when fans are social distance, I'm thinking of the last couple of Bills games I've seen on the road, because we can't have fans here in Buffalo. And seeing fans spaced out is more of a reminder of a pandemic than an empty stadium actually is, in my opinion. So I think it's putting a lot of responsibility away from necessarily responsible people.
And Andy, I think that the important thing to remember here is that it'll only be done safely. It'll only be done if cases are low in certain areas. Some of the bigger things around, sort of, the clubs are focused on getting as many fans in as soon as possible. Everton, Chelsea, and West Ham have already come out and said, we back this from the UK government. The Premier League has said we back this. But Chelsea, West Ham, and the Premier League, in their statements, that they said we want to work towards kind of having a roadmap for more fans coming in as soon as possible. So I think there's an acceptance that it'd be great to have fans, and it's a starting point. But financially, for Premier League clubs, it will probably cost them money to have 2,000 to 4,000 fans in the stadium because of the policing costs, stewarding, extra safety measures they have to put in place. So it's that weighing up kind of the pros and cons. But what's your take on it? And, I think we have to remember as well, the Premier League and the UK government have moved very cautiously on this, because elsewhere in Europe, we've already seen fans come back previously to this.
Yeah, that obviously it's a very complex issue with a lot of moving parts involved, and as you say, things that are more important than can we get people back into football stadiums. And I think the big takeaway that I would have is the juxtaposition of lockdown ends December 2nd, but also beginning December 2nd, we believe that we can safely congregate people, even in these very large venues, as you say, and point out, in numbers into the thousands. It, the lockdown is not going to immediately fix the COVID-19 problem in the UK. It is meant as, to buy time and to reduce the spread that is happening there. And to immediately come out of that makes me wonder a little bit, is this more about what they want to do than what they really need to be doing at that point? And then to piggyback off of what Nick said about the responsibility of the fans, if you escalate it then a level further and say that there is an incident in the stands where somebody is not abiding by those rules, who is it then on? It's on a steward who is not really paid to police the stadiums, as they will then be put in charge to do. So they will have a much greater responsibility, not just to the people in the stadium, but to society as a whole, to, take on a very large responsibility. And it just, there's a lot of places where it can go wrong, I guess, would be my fear with bringing fans back into stadiums. And obviously it's happened a bit here in the US, and it seems to have gone, in some instances, I guess, mostly okay. It's just, it's just a really tricky, slippery slope that once you start down and people see, okay, it's fine to go back to football again, it's fine to also do this in my everyday life, it opens up another can of worms. And I just wonder what the overall, the greater kind of impact is going to be from bringing fans back into these stadiums.
And I think Premier League clubs and the league itself, they want more fans to come in, of course, but we have to remember, with the denseness of the population in most of these cities in England, the stadiums, you guys have been over here, you've seen it, I see it every week traveling around. A lot of fans, there's no parking. It's not, like a lot of sports stadiums in the US and elsewhere where there's huge parking lots where you can park up, come in and come out pretty safely. I mean, you have to get trains, buses, other forms of transport to these stadiums. So that's maybe why the government are being slightly more cautious about, I'm sure Tottenham Hotspur Stadium pretty safely could have 20 to 30,000 fans at a 50% capacity. But then how do you get those fans to and from the stadium without impacting the area? And I do want to say the tiering system, we don't know yet which regions of England are going to be in which tier. So if we're going off before the most recent lockdown, there were only 2 Premier League clubs out of the 20 that were sat in tier 1 status, and that was Southampton and Brighton. And those are the only 2 teams that, if it's the same when they come out of lockdown, will actually have the opportunity to have 4,000 fans at upcoming games. And then that kind of brings in the old debate of, well, if you're allowing fans at Southampton and Brighton and you're not at Newcastle and Liverpool, then is that a competitive advantage? Is it a disadvantage for teams without fans? But I think at this point, we all agree that having fans back, if it's safe in a certain area, is okay. And I don't think, many clubs can really have many complaints about that situation. But Andy, I know you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, having been over a couple times and been to a couple of these Premier League stadiums, you also have to factor in the match day routine of fans. It's not just we go to the stadium, we're there for 2 hours, we watch the game, we go home. It is, we're at this place for 2 hours before the game. We make our walk over to the stadium in a group, same people all the time. After the game, we're not just going straight back home. We're going back to the pub for a couple more hours at least. And so, and I guess that is the biggest point that I come back to, is normalizing returning to sporting events, I think, runs the risk of normalizing a lot of everyday normal things that have changed during the time of COVID-19, and people falling back into, kind of the regular routine, and just how destructive and how, what the negative impact of that could be for people. So I would really, really hope that people practice caution and understand that this is not a return to normal. This is you're just being given a little something back that you really, really miss, and you have to enjoy it in moderation, I guess, would be the point.
And Nick, quickly on this to wrap it up, what's the spectacle been like? You talked about Bills games and seeing fans there, and seeing fans elsewhere. Do you think this will improve the spectacle from what you've seen of US sports for Premier League around the globe?
I don't know. I'm struggling with this because for me, I think because of during the pandemic, it's become less about seeing the fans. I know what it adds, and I love what it adds, and I look forward to it to being full. But I just don't know that anything short of full is going to do much other than, again, remind me that we're in a weird time and a bad time. And so maybe that can serve as a reminder to people that, wow, look at those people spaced out. That's kind of where I sit.
Yeah, and of course there will be restrictions. I mean, social distancing measures will be in place. Fans will have to wear masks. They're not sure if they can have a beer yet in the stadiums. That's been one of the points of contention. And also, they've said they might have to limit chanting and cheering, which, as we all know, the Premier League and the passion of the fans, it's known for that. So, it's not an ideal situation or world we're living in. Sports leagues around the globe are trying to find the best fit. The UK government has now given the Premier League an opportunity to do that. So let's see which direction they can take it, depending on where clubs are located and which tier they are in terms of the restrictions. So we'll keep you updated with that on Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com with all the latest news on fans returning to Premier League stadiums for the first time since March.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and always join us every weekend at 7 a.m. on NBCSN for Premier League mornings. Plus, make sure you subscribe to Peacock Premium as well, where you can watch exclusively live 175 games and same-day on-demand replays of all 380 Premier League matches as well.